Have you ever wondered why one single number has frightened people for almost 2,000 years? Why hotels quietly skip the room labeled 666? Why highways get renamed? Why some people feel a small chill when three identical digits appear at the bottom of a receipt? Is this really the secret code of a future world dictator, hidden in a microchip, a barcode, a national ID? Or is the truth something older, stranger, and far more precise than almost anything you have been told? For nearly 20 centuries, this has been called the most feared number in human history. Entire libraries have been written trying to crack it. Millions of people are convinced it points to something still ahead of us, waiting in the technology of tomorrow. But what if the first readers of the Book of Revelation already knew exactly what it meant, and St. John deliberately left the key inside the text itself? Today, we are going to discover what the number 666 actually meant to the man who wrote it. The evidence buried inside the oldest surviving manuscripts on Earth, and the question this number is still asking every single one of us. Let us begin with something that surprises almost everyone. When people hear the number 666, they usually think of fear. They picture something invisible being forced onto the body, a chip under the skin, a scannable code, a system that tracks every purchase. And because the fear feels modern, the number feels modern too. But read what St. John actually writes. In the Book of Revelation, chapter 13, verse 18, the line is this: "This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Knows what he does not say. He does not say tremble. He does not say run. He does not say wait for a distant century when you will finally understand. He says calculate. He hands his readers a puzzle and expects them to solve it. In the original Greek, the verb comes from the word for a small stone used on a counting board. It is the word you would use for doing arithmetic. That single detail changes everything. A puzzle designed to be unsolvable for 2,000 years would be a cruel joke. A puzzle addressed to 7 specific churches, in 7 specific cities, in a specific decade of the Roman Empire, is something else entirely. It is a message written for people who were in danger right now, and who needed to recognize that danger by name. So the real question is not what 666 will mean someday. The real question is this: what would those 7 congregations holding this letter in their hands have understood the moment they heard it read aloud? To answer that, we have to walk into their world. Picture the western coast of what is now Turkey, near the end of the 1st century. This is the Roman province of Asia, the wealthiest, proudest, most competitive region of the Eastern Empire. Ephesus with its harbor and its enormous temple, Smyrna with its crowned hill, Pergamum with its altar rising above the plain, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, Laodicea. These are the 7 cities St. John names, and he names them in the exact order a messenger would visit them traveling the Roman road. These cities were not persecuting Christians out of random cruelty. They were competing for honor. And in the Roman East, the highest honor a city could receive was permission to build a temple to the emperor. Pergamum won that privilege first, back in the age of Augustus. Ephesus and Smyrna fought for the same prize. Being a center of the imperial cult meant festivals, crowds, money, prestige. So imperial worship was not a distant government policy. It was the civic pride of your own hometown, the parade going down your own street. And here is where the pressure became unbearable. Loyalty to the emperor was woven into ordinary economic life. Trade guilds held banquets that opened with an offering. Public festivals expected participation. Roman coins carried the emperor's face with inscriptions calling him Son of the Divine One. To handle money, to join a guild, to sell in the marketplace, you were constantly brushing against a claim that no Christian could accept, that a man was Lord and God. There is a letter that captures this with chilling clarity. Around the year 112, Pliny the Younger, the Roman governor of a neighboring province, wrote to the Emperor Trajan asking how to handle Christians. His method was simple. He brought them before an image of the emperor and told them to offer wine and incense and curse Christ. Those who did were released. Those who refused were executed. Read Revelation chapter 13 again with that letter in your mind. No one could buy or sell unless he had the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. That is not science fiction. That is a description of an economy in which visible loyalty to a man who claimed divinity was the price of ordinary survival. Now hold that image, because something is still missing. We know what the beast does. We still do not know who he is. And this is where St. John does something brilliant, something almost invisible to modern eyes. In the ancient world, there were no separate symbols for numbers. Hebrew and Greek used the letters of the alphabet. Alpha was 1, beta was 2, iota was 10. Every letter carried a numeric value, which meant every name in the ancient world carried a number automatically, whether anyone thought about it or not. The Greeks called this isopsephy. The Jews called it gematria. And it was not a secret occult art. It was a common game, a riddle, a way of hiding a name in plain sight. We know this because of an accident preserved in volcanic ash. Picture the city of Pompeii in the year 79. Buried in a single afternoon by Vesuvius, its walls frozen exactly as they stood. When archaeologists uncovered those walls, they found graffiti everywhere. Election slogans, insults, jokes, and among them, scratched by someone in love, a line that reads, "I love her whose number is 545. Think about what that tells us. An ordinary person, on an ordinary street, writing an ordinary flirtation, expected the reader to understand that a name could be turned into a number. It was so common it did not need explaining. So when St. John writes, "Calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man," his readers would not have been confused. They would have leaned forward. They would have started counting. And there is a strong candidate. There is one name that fits so precisely that scholars have found it difficult to explain as coincidence. The Emperor Nero. Here is how it works. Take his full imperial title in Greek, Neron Kaiser, and transliterate it into Hebrew letters, the way Jewish writers of the period regularly did. You get Nun, Resh, Waw, Nun, Kof, Samek, Resh. Now add the values. Nun is 50, Resh is 200, Waw is 6, Nun again, 50, Kof is 100, Samek is 60, Resh again, 200, 50, plus 200, plus 6, plus 50, plus 100, plus 60, plus 200, 666. And Nero fits the portrait in Revelation chapter 13 far too well to ignore. He was the first Roman emperor to launch a systematic persecution of Christians in Rome. After the Great Fire of the year 64, the Roman historian Tacitus, who was no friend of Christianity, describes the executions in detail. Christians condemn not so much for arson as for what he calls hatred of the human race, torn apart by dogs, crucified, burned to light the night. Ancient Christian tradition places the deaths of both St. Peter and St. Paul in that same wave of blood. A ruler demanding divine honors. A ruler who turned the empire's power against the followers of Christ. A name that adds to the exact number in the text. So the puzzle is solved. The riddle is closed. We can all go home. Except we cannot, because there is a problem with Nero. A problem so serious that it has divided scholars for centuries. And if you have been listening carefully, you may already sense it. Nero was dead. Nero died in June of the year 68. Outside Rome, by his own hand. Abandoned by his own guard. He was 30 years old. And yet the earliest testimony we have about when Revelation was written points to a much later date. Saint Irenaeus, writing around the year 180, says the vision was seen near the end of the reign of Domitian, which would place it around the year 95. That is nearly 3 decades after Nero's body was carried out of the city. So how can St. John hand his readers a riddle whose answer is a corpse? This is the moment where most explanations collapse. Either the Nero calculation is a coincidence, they say, or Revelation must have been written much earlier than tradition suggests. For a long time, that was the whole debate. One side or the other. But the text itself offers a third possibility, and it is stranger than either. Turn to chapter 17. St. John describes the beast again, and he says something that makes no sense as ordinary history. The beast that you saw was, and is not, and is about to rise from the abyss. Was, is not, is about to rise now. To understand why that sentence would have made the hair stand up on the necks of first-century readers, you need to know something that almost no one talks about today. When Nero died, most of the Roman world refused to believe it. His death happened far from public view. The body was cremated quickly. There had been no great state funeral, no parade of the corpse through the Forum. And Nero, despised by the Senate, had been genuinely popular among the common people of the East, who remembered his festivals and his gifts and his love of Greek culture. So a rumor spread across the empire, and it did not fade. Nero was not dead. Nero had escaped east, across the Euphrates, to the Parthians. Nero was gathering an army. Nero was coming back. The Roman historian Suetonius records that for years afterward, edicts were circulated in Nero's name, promising his return. Tacitus describes the eastern provinces trembling at the news, and within about 20 years, at least 3 different men appeared claiming to be Nero, each gathering followers, each causing genuine alarm in Rome. Historians call this phenomenon Nero redivivus, Nero returning. There is even a Jewish text from the period, the Sibylline Oracles, that speaks of a fugitive from Rome who will come back from the ends of the earth with a great host, a matricide returning to destroy. Now read St. John's line one more time. The beast that was, and is not, and is about to rise. Do you see what he has done? He has not simply pointed at one man. He has pointed at a pattern, using the name that his readers could calculate. Wearing the face of the emperor, everyone in the East expected to walk back out of the darkness, which is why the answer is not Nero, and nothing more. The answer, according to many scholars, is closer to this. Nero is the face, and the beast is the thing that keeps putting on that face. A power that demands the worship owed to God alone, that punishes those who refuse, and that dies and rises again in every century under a new name. That would be a satisfying place to stop. But there is something else. And it is the piece of evidence that transformed this debate. Because it did not come from a theory, it came out of a hole in the sand. Picture the desert of Middle Egypt, a place called Oxyrhynchus. In ancient times, it was a bustling provincial town. And like every town, it had a rubbish heap, because it almost never rained there. That rubbish heap did something no European trash pile could do. It preserved paper. Beginning in the late 19th century, archaeologists began digging through those mounds, and they pulled out hundreds of thousands of fragments of papyrus, tax receipts, private letters, lost plays, shopping lists, and scattered among them, fragments of the Christian scriptures, older than any complete Bible in the world. One of those fragments is cataloged as Papyrus 115. It was published in 1999, and it contains portions of the Book of Revelation. Most scholars date it to somewhere around the year 250 or a little later, which makes it one of the oldest surviving witnesses to the text of Revelation that we possess. And when scholars reach chapter 13, verse 18, the number written on that page was not 666. It was 616. Now, at first hearing, that sounds like a scribal error. The kind of slip a tired copyist makes at midnight. And your instinct might be to dismiss it, but you should not, and here is why. Saint Irenaeus, back in the 2nd century, already knew about this variant. He mentions it, and he argues against it, insisting that the better manuscripts read 666, which means the other reading was already circulating within roughly a century of the text being written. It is not a late mistake. It is ancient. And here's the detail that turns a curiosity into evidence. Remember how we calculated Nero's name? We used the Greek form, Neron Kaiser, transliterated into Hebrew, and it came to 666. But in Latin, the emperor's name commonly appeared without that final N. Nero Caesar. Take that Latin form, transliterate it into Hebrew the same way, and you drop one letter, the nun, worth 50. 666 minus 50, 616. Think about what that means. If some early scribe had simply miscounted or smudged a letter, we would expect a random number. Instead, we get the second number that the same name produces in the other language of the empire, which suggests something remarkable, that an early Christian copyist somewhere, working from the Latin form of the name, understood exactly who the riddle pointed to and adjusted the arithmetic to match. The so-called error is not evidence that the text was corrupted. It is evidence that the earliest readers had already solved it. 2 numbers, 1 name. Preserved in the oldest paper we have. And yet, if we stop here, we will have gotten the history right and missed the point entirely. Because St. John was not writing a crossword. He was writing about worship, and the number itself, apart from any emperor, carries a meaning that his readers would have felt in their bones. Throughout Scripture, 7 is the number of completion. 7 days of creation, with God resting on the 7th. 7 branches on the lampstand of the temple. 7 churches in this very book. 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls. 7 means whole, finished, perfect. 6 is what falls 1 short. 6 is the number that reaches for completion and cannot get there. 6 is almost, and almost forever. And in Revelation, the number is not written once, but 3 times over. 666, a triple insistence on incompleteness. Consider what that mocks. In this same book, the Lord God is proclaimed as the one who was, and who is to come. 3-fold, complete. Now set beside it a beast that was and is not, and is about to rise, marked by a triple 6. It is a counterfeit of the divine, a hollow imitation that can copy the shape of eternity but never fill it. And St. John tells you exactly what it is. It is the number of a man, not of a devil, not of a machine. A man insisting on being worshipped as God, which is the oldest lie there is, the one first whispered in a garden. There is one more detail here, and early Christians noticed it very quickly. Take the name Jesus in Greek, Jesus, and count it the same way. Iota, 10. Eta, 8. Sigma, 200. Omicron, 70. Upsilon, 400. Sigma, 200. 888. 8. In early Christian symbolism is the day after the 7th, the 8th day, the day of resurrection, the number of new creation. Which is why so many ancient baptismal fonts were built with 8 sides. You went down into the water on the 8th day of the week, the day the tomb was found empty. So the contrast is not merely 6 against 7. It is 6, falling short, against 8, overflowing past completion into new life. But even this is not the deepest layer, because there is a question sitting underneath the whole chapter that we have not asked yet. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. St. John says the mark is placed on the right hand and on the forehead. Why those 2 places? Why so specific? The answer is hiding in a book written more than 1,000 years earlier, and it changes what this entire chapter is about. Open the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 6. This is the passage every faithful Jew knew by heart. Hear, O Israel, The Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. And then, immediately after, comes the instruction. You shall bind them as a sign upon your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, on your hand, on your forehead. By the 1st century, this was not a metaphor. Devout Jews wore small leather boxes containing those words of Scripture, bound to the arm and to the head at prayer. Archaeologists have found them. Fragments of these little scrolls were recovered in the caves at Qumran near the Dead Sea. Tiny pieces of parchment written in a hand so small it seems impossible, carrying those same words. From before the time of Christ, the hand meant your actions. The forehead meant your mind. Together they meant the whole person. Publicly claimed, publicly belonging. Now look again at Revelation chapter 13. The beast puts his mark on the right hand and on the forehead. It is a parody, a deliberate, mocking imitation of the oldest sign of belonging to God. And once you see that, the entire chapter turns inside out, because Revelation does not only describe a mark of the beast, it describes another mark first, in chapter 7, before any of this. An angel cries out to hold back the destruction. Do not harm the earth or the sea or the trees until we have sealed the servants of our God upon their foreheads. And in chapter 14, when St. John sees the Lamb standing on Mount Zion, he says of those with him that his name and his Father's name were written on their foreheads. 2 marks, 2 names. The same place on the body. Which means the question St. John is actually asking has never been the question we thought. We have spent centuries asking what the number is and whose it is. But that was never the point of the riddle. The point of the riddle was to make the answer clear enough that his readers could stop worrying about identifying the beast and start facing the real question. Not what number is on his forehead, but whose name is on yours. That is the reversal at the heart of chapter 13. The beast is not frightening because he is mysterious. He is frightening because he is an imitation, offering the same thing God offers: belonging, security, the right to buy and sell and live in peace at the price of your worship. Every empire that has ever demanded absolute loyalty has been making that offer. And notice something the text says with total clarity, which almost every modern retelling misses. The mark is never described as something forced onto an unwilling victim in secret. It is described as an allegiance that is visible. In chapter 14, the ones who receive it are those who worship. The mark follows the worship. It does not create it. That should be an enormous relief to anyone who has ever lain awake, afraid of accidentally receiving it. Nobody stumbles into the worship of a false god by scanning a barcode. What Revelation describes is a choice, made in the open, before a watching world. And here is where the Catholic reader should feel the ground shift, because if you have been baptized, you have already been marked. The priest traced the sign of the cross on your forehead before the water was ever poured, and the words of the Church in that moment claim you as belonging to Christ. At confirmation, the bishop anoints that same forehead with sacred chrism and speaks the seal of the gift of the Holy Spirit. On Ash Wednesday, once a year, we make it visible again in ash, in public, on the street, where anyone can see it. Long before anyone worried about marks and numbers and technology, the Church was already doing exactly what Revelation chapter 7 describes: sealing foreheads, naming whose people we are. The Catechism of the Catholic Church speaks of this seal as a permanent character, a mark that remains, which means the Christian answer to the mark of the beast is not vigilance about what might be put on you someday. It is faithfulness to what has already been put on you. Now, the Church does teach that the drama of Revelation is not finished. The Catechism, in paragraphs 675 to 677, speaks plainly about a final trial before Christ returns, a religious deception, offering people an apparent solution to their problems at the price of turning away from the truth. It calls this the supreme religious deception of the Antichrist. So the church does not say the beast belongs only to the 1st century. But notice what the church does not do. It does not name him. It does not set a date. It does not identify any living ruler, any nation, any technology. And there is wisdom in that restraint, because the history of trying is not a proud one across the centuries. Sincere believers have calculated this number out of the names of popes and emperors and reformers and generals and presidents. Every one of those calculations felt urgent at the time. Every one of them is now a footnote. The arithmetic will always cooperate if you are willing to switch languages, add a title, or drop a letter. Which brings us back to something we noticed at the very beginning. And it is time to close that loop. St. John did not write, "Fear this number." He wrote, "Let the one who has understanding calculate." He gave his readers a key, and he expected them to use it, and then to get on with the far harder work of remaining faithful in a city where faithfulness cost them their business, their guild, their safety. That was the real test in Ephesus and Smyrna and Pergamum. Not decoding, refusing. Let us bring this into the present. You will probably never be dragged before a statue and told to burn incense. But the arrangement Revelation describes, where full participation in ordinary life quietly requires you to affirm something you do not believe, is not an antique. Every generation meets some version of it. A workplace where speaking honestly about your faith would cost you, a circle of friends where certain convictions are simply not sayable, a culture that will grant you everything you need, as long as nothing you believe is allowed to change how you actually live. Imagine for a moment a Christian merchant in Pergamum. He is not being tortured. Nobody has come to his door. He simply has an invitation to a guild banquet. And the banquet opens with a small offering to the emperor. A pinch of incense, a few seconds. And if he does not attend, he loses his contracts, and his children eat less this winter. Nothing dramatic. No dungeon, no lions. Just a small, reasonable compromise, offered 100 times over a lifetime. That is how a mark is received. Not in one terrible moment, but in the slow, quiet transfer of ultimate loyalty from God to whatever can pay the bills. And that is why the number is the number of a man. Not a monster, a man. Which is another way of saying that the beast has never needed supernatural power to win. It only needs people who would rather be safe than faithful. Perhaps that is the most unsettling thing about this number. We have spent 2,000 years searching for it on other people's foreheads, when St. John wrote it so that we would finally look at our own. It was never meant to make us afraid of the future. It was meant to make us honest about the present. If today you feel the weight of a compromise you are being asked to make, some small pinch of incense that would make everything easier, remember that you have already been sealed. The sign traced on your forehead at the beginning of your Christian life was not decoration. It was a declaration that you belong to God, made before you were old enough to argue. Nothing that any power on earth stamps on you afterward can erase it. You do not have to be strong enough to resist the beast. You only have to remain who you already are. If this journey through the book of Revelation stirred something in you, take a moment to think about the sign of the cross you make almost without noticing, and make the next one slowly. And if there is someone you know who has spent years afraid of this number, share this with them. Fear is a heavy thing to carry alone, and truth is lighter. Now we would like to hear from you. Do you believe the number 666 pointed to Nero and the Rome of the 1st century? Its riddle already solved by the people who first received it? Or do you believe it is a warning that returns in every generation, wearing a new face each time? Tell us in the comments which side you stand on, and why. We read everyone.